I'd inherited the quiet little house on Juniper Lane just 3 months ago. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a peaceful escape from the chaos of the city. Little did I know those skills were about to become terrifyingly, brutally relevant in my own backyard. The neighborhood, at first glance, was picture perfect. White picket fences, manicured lawns, the kind of place where birds chirped perpetually and everyone waved. It even came with its own homeowners association, a seemingly benign entity designed to keep things orderly. Then the storm rolled in. Not a cloud in the sky, just the arrival of her. The self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, a woman whose mere presence seemed to suck the joy out of the air, replacing it with an oppressive aura of rules and regulations. It started with the mailbox. It was 5:58 a.m. My brand-new mailbox, a sturdy, standard-issue model, lay twisted on the sidewalk like a pretzel made of aluminum. I figured it was some reckless teenager, or maybe a late-night delivery driver. These things happen, right? I spent that afternoon at the hardware store, replaced it, and installed it myself. No big deal. 30 minutes after I finished, she materialized on my porch. She wore a concerned expression and a shiny gold badge that read HOA President, pinned to her blazer like she was the sheriff of suburbia. "Oh my goodness, I heard about your mailbox. What a terrible accident," she cooed, peering around me to get a look inside my house. "I hope you're not too shaken up. We've never had anything like this happen in our neighborhood before. It's so unusual." The way she said unusual made it sound like I had personally invited chaos into their perfect little world. She asked about my work schedule, whether I had many visitors, and if I planned any renovations. "We just want to ensure new residents fall in line," she explained with that plastic smile. "Some people fit right in, others need a little guidance." 2 weeks later, it happened again. Same time, same angle, same twisted metal aftermath. I was starting to see a pattern, but I still told myself it was just bad luck. Maybe someone had a grudge against the previous homeowner. I replaced the mailbox again, this time installing a small security camera pointed toward the street. Nothing fancy, just a basic setup to catch whoever was doing this. Her second visit came with more questions and less fake sympathy. She wanted to know about the camera, asking if I had permission from the HOA to install surveillance equipment. When I told her it was just to protect my property, she nodded slowly like she was filing that information away for later use. Of course. We all want to feel safe. Just remember that cameras can't point toward neighboring properties. Privacy is very important in our community." She handed me a thick HOA regulations booklet, a tome that looked like it had been written by lawyers who charged by the word. The third mailbox got destroyed on a crisp October morning. This time, I was ready. I watched from my bedroom window as the black SUV approached at exactly 5:58 a.m., slowed down just enough to line up the shot, then accelerated straight into my mailbox with the precision of a guided missile. The impact sent metal flying across my lawn, and I finally got a clear look at the license plate. It matched perfectly with the SUV parked in the driveway of the biggest house on the street, her house. I spent that day reviewing my security footage and taking detailed notes. The pattern was undeniable. Every other Monday, same time, same deliberate targeting. This wasn't random vandalism or drunk driving. This was personal, systematic harassment disguised as accidents. But why? I barely knew the woman. We'd had maybe 3 conversations, all of them perfectly polite. Then it hit me like a ton of suburban bricks. In our first conversation, she had asked if I was single, mentioned a coffee shop she liked, and suggested we get to know each other better. I had politely declined, explaining that I was focused on work and getting settled. Her smile had flickered for just a moment before returning to full wattage. My polite refusal had apparently been a declaration of war. When she came by after the third incident, I was watching her carefully. She examined the wreckage with the enthusiasm of an art critic studying a masterpiece, taking photos from multiple angles for the HOA records. She mentioned how these accidents seemed to happen only to my mailbox, never anyone else's, and suggested that maybe I should consider moving it to a safer location. When I pointed out that the mailbox was exactly where the previous owners had placed it for 30 years without incident, she just shrugged. "Sometimes change brings unforeseen consequences," she said, and walked away. Monday morning, 5:58 a.m. I stood at my bedroom window with coffee in hand, watching her black SUV approach like clockwork. She had no idea I was expecting her this time, no clue that I'd been documenting every single one of her accidents with multiple camera angles. The impact played out exactly as I'd predicted. Deliberate approach, brief pause to line up the shot, then full acceleration into mailbox number 4. The sound of crushing metal echoed through the sleeping neighborhood, and I watched her SUV back away from the scene like a hit-and-run driver fleeing the crime. But this time was different. This time I had everything on video. Crystal clear footage of her, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood dictator, deliberately destroying my property with the precision of someone who'd done this before. A lot. I had her license plate, her face behind the windshield, and the unmistakable body language of someone who thought they were untouchable. She was about to learn how wrong she was. 30 minutes later, right on schedule, she knocked on my door. "Honey, we need to talk," she said, pushing past me into my living room without waiting for an invitation. "This situation with your mailbox is becoming quite concerning." "Concerning how?" I asked, genuinely curious to see where this was going. She settled herself on my couch like she was holding court, smoothing her blazer and fixing me with the kind of stare that probably worked on previous victims. "Well, sweetie, this neighborhood has standards, certain expectations. Some neighbors adapt, but others require correction." Her voice carried the tone of someone used to being obeyed without question. She asked about my work schedule with the persistence of someone conducting an interrogation. Did I work from home? How often did I have deliveries? Were clients coming to the house? Did I understand that home-based businesses required special permits? The thing is, Caleb, Derek and I have responsibilities to this community. We keep this place nice and orderly, safe for families. We can't have residents who don't respect the rules we've all agreed to follow. You know what, Rhonda? You're absolutely right. Standards are important. Consistency matters. People should get exactly what they deserve. Something in my tone made her pause, but she recovered quickly, flashing that plastic smile and standing up to leave. "I'm so glad we understand each other," she said, heading for the door. "Oh, and honey, you might want to consider moving that mailbox to a safer location. These accidents seem to happen only to yours, and we wouldn't want someone to get hurt." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. She was openly admitting to the destruction while simultaneously threatening to escalate if I didn't comply with her unstated demands. After she left, I spent the morning reviewing the HOA regulations she'd given me. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic language designed to give the board unlimited power over residents' lives. Vague phrases like community standards and aesthetic harmony could be interpreted any way the leadership wanted. Grass couldn't exceed 3 inches in height. Paint colors had to be approved neutral tones. No unauthorized signage, no modifications without permission, no activities that might disturb the peaceful enjoyment of others. I called my neighbor, a 70-year-old widow who lived next door and had become my unofficial guide to neighborhood politics. "Oh, honey," she said when I told her about my conversation, "you need to be careful. That woman has forced 3 families to move away in the past 2 years. The Johnsons, the Rodriguez family, and those nice young people with the twin babies. She finds violations everywhere, stacks up the fines until people can't afford to stay. She invited me over for coffee and showed me her own collection of violation notices, 23 of them, each for increasingly ridiculous infractions. Grass, allegedly too tall, measured to fractions of inches. Garden flowers, supposedly non-compliant species. Her American flag was apparently displayed improperly. Each violation came with fines ranging from $75 to $300, and they accumulated faster than anyone could realistically address them. "She does it to anyone who doesn't immediately bow down to her authority," she explained, pulling out a folder thick with documentation. "New residents get tested first. If you pass the submission test, she leaves you alone. If you show any sign of independence or backbone, she destroys you systematically until you have no choice but to leave." She showed me photos of the other targeted families, all of whom had committed the crime of questioning her authority in some small way. That afternoon, she made her first official move against me. Her nervous second-in-command appeared at my door with a clipboard. He handed me a yellow violation notice written in formal bureaucratic language that boiled down to, my grass was 3.2 inches tall instead of the regulation 3 inches maximum. The fine was $75, payable within 48 hours. I measured my grass with a ruler that evening and found it was exactly the same height as every other lawn on the street, but only mine had received a violation. When I walked around the neighborhood taking photos for comparison, I noticed her watching me from her window, probably planning her next move in this bizarre game of suburban chess. The violation notice was printed on bright yellow paper and posted prominently on my front door like some medieval decree announcing my crimes to the entire neighborhood. Other residents walked by without making eye contact, probably grateful that they weren't the current target of her attention. The message was clear: comply or be destroyed. That night, I sat in my workshop staring at the growing pile of mailbox debris and thinking about what my neighbor had told me. 3 families forced out of their homes by a woman drunk on the tiny bit of power that came with an HOA presidency. How many more would follow if someone didn't stand up to her? How many neighbors were living in fear, walking on eggshells, afraid to plant the wrong flowers or paint their shutters the wrong shade of white? Watching her nail that yellow paper to my door like some medieval decree, I finally got it. This wasn't about mailboxes. This was about control, and she just picked the wrong guy to control. The yellow paper onslaught. The yellow papers started appearing on my door like clockwork. Every Tuesday morning, her second-in-command would show up with his clipboard and nervous smile, posting another violation notice while she supervised from her SUV parked across the street. It was psychological warfare disguised as municipal bureaucracy, and they had turned it into a science. By the end of week 2, my front door looked like a crime scene bulletin board. 5 violation slips in one morning. Illegal paint, grass 0.2 inches too high, aggressive parking posture, suspicious tool usage, and the classic failure to comply with community aesthetics. She had stopped pretending. This was a siege. By week 3, they were getting creative. Vehicle positioning creates sightline obstruction for pedestrian safety. My car, parked legally in my own driveway exactly where my grandparents had parked theirs for 30 years, was suddenly a hazard to the community. $200. Then came excessive noise during permitted hours because I used power tools in my garage workshop during the clearly designated time frame for such activity. $300. The noise complaint was particularly impressive since I had been building a whisper-quiet jewelry box for a romantic comedy when her second-in-command knocked on my door. I started documenting everything with the thoroughness of someone who builds special effects for a living. Photos, timestamps, measurements, recordings. I had comparison shots showing my grass was identical to my neighbor's. Paint samples proving my white was exactly the same white as approved houses. Decibel readings from my workshop that were quieter than a normal conversation. None of it mattered. She had weaponized the HOA regulations into a personal destruction system, and she was just getting started. The psychological pressure was remarkable in its efficiency. Every morning I'd check my front door to see if a new yellow notice had appeared overnight, like some kind of bureaucratic scarlet letter. Neighbors started avoiding eye contact when they walked past, probably grateful they weren't in her crosshairs, but also afraid that showing me any support might make them the next target. The isolation was deliberate and effective. My neighbor slipped me a note one afternoon. "She's been driving by your house 6 times a day taking pictures. She did the same thing to the Martinez family before she forced them out. Be careful." I started keeping track of her surveillance schedule and discovered she was treating my house like a military target, documenting every detail, looking for new angles of attack. My first attempt at fighting back was subtle and technically legal. I installed a sign in my front yard that read, "Area under HOA surveillance," with official-looking symbols and small print about monitoring equipment. It was factually accurate, aesthetically neutral, and completely within the regulations I had studied cover to cover. Her reaction was swift and nuclear. Her second-in-command appeared at my door within 2 hours, sweating more than usual and clutching a violation notice that was practically smoking. Unauthorized signage displaying non-approved messaging creates community discord. $500. When I protested that the sign met all the stated requirements, her second-in-command actually looked sorry for me. She says the intent is clearly confrontational, which violates the community harmony clause. That evening, she called me directly for the first time. Her voice was ice-cold professional, with an undertone of barely controlled fury. "Honey, I think we need to clarify something. This community has rules for a reason. When residents decide they're smarter than the system, when they think they can outsmart people who've been maintaining these standards for years, well, that's when things get complicated. She paused long enough for the threat to sink in. Your current violation total is $1,200. That might seem like a lot, but trust me, it can get much higher if we keep playing these little games. I hung up and did some math. In 3 weeks, she had manufactured over $1,000 in fines for violations that existed only in her imagination. At this rate, she'd have grounds to place a lien on my house within 2 months. I called my neighbor to ask about the families who'd been forced out, and the story was always the same: escalating violations, mounting fines, impossible deadlines, until selling the house became the only financially viable option. The next morning brought violation number 6, landscaping placement within prohibited setback zone. The memorial flower garden my grandparents had planted 30 years ago was suddenly too close to the street. $750 plus mandatory removal of all non-compliant vegetation within 72 hours. This one hit different. This was personal. I spent that afternoon in the garden my grandparents had lovingly tended, measuring distances and reviewing old property surveys. These weren't just flowers. They were Sundays with Grandma. Bent knees in the dirt and Grandpa's humming while laying the stepping stones. Watching her crush them felt like watching memories burn. But she wasn't interested in history or legality. She was interested in breaking me. When her second-in-command came by to deliver violation number 7 the next day, excessive garage utilization for non-residential purposes, I asked him a direct question. Do you actually believe any of these violations are legitimate? He looked around nervously as if she might be hiding in the bushes with a recording device. Look, man, I just do what she tells me. I need this position on my resume for the city council job I'm applying for. She has connections. The man was a coward, but at least he knew what they were doing was wrong. That night, I sat in my workshop calculating the total damage, $1,550 in fines, with more coming every few days. She had given me 1 week to pay or face escalated enforcement proceedings, which probably meant a lien on the house. She'd done this before, perfected the system, turned it into a machine for crushing anyone who dared to challenge her authority. But she had made one critical mistake. She had no idea who she was dealing with. In my line of work, I don't just build things that break. I build things that look like they'll break, then surprise everyone by being stronger than anyone imagined. And I was about to apply those skills to a very special project. The garden's demise and the revelation. The memorial garden was my grandparents' pride and joy. Every spring, Grandma would spend hours tending the roses they'd planted together. 30 years of careful cultivation, creating something beautiful for the whole neighborhood to enjoy. Grandpa had laid each stepping stone by hand, creating gentle pathways between the flower beds so visitors could walk through and appreciate the different varieties. It was a testament to their love for each other and their commitment to making their little corner of the world more beautiful. She destroyed it on a Thursday morning in November. I watched from my kitchen window as she arrived with her second-in-command and another crony, both of them carrying measuring devices and clipboards like they were conducting some kind of official survey. She walked straight into the garden wearing her most businesslike expression, pointed at various plants while her assistant scribbled notes, then began systematically trampling through the flower beds. Not by accident, not due to clumsiness. With deliberate, methodical precision, she crushed the antique roses that had survived 3 decades of Michigan winters. She scattered the memorial stones Grandpa had placed to mark the anniversary of their wedding. She ground daffodil bulbs into the mud with her designer heels, all while her assistant documented the property line violations she was allegedly discovering. When I ran outside to confront them, she looked up from the destruction with that same plastic smile she'd worn during our first meeting. "Oh, honey, we're just conducting the mandatory inspection I mentioned in your violation notice. These plantings are clearly within the prohibited setback zone, which is a serious safety issue for emergency vehicles." She gestured at the crushed roses like they were toxic waste. "I know it's disappointing, but regulations exist for everyone's protection." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. She was destroying 30 years of love and care while lecturing me about community safety. I knelt among the destroyed flowers, my hands shaking with anger as I picked up pieces of broken memorial stones. That night, I stared at the garden from my window, unable to sleep. I opened a new tab to look up how to forfeit a house to the HOA. I even drafted a resignation letter from the property. I was tired, beaten. She had not just destroyed a garden, she had ripped out the last piece of home I had left. Then I saw it. Grandpa's old gardening book, sitting untouched on the shelf. I opened it to a page dog-eared and faded, and tucked between two brittle leaves was a note in his handwriting. It said, "We don't plant roses for today. We plant them so someone else can sit in the shade tomorrow." I sat down on the floor. For the first time since this war began, I cried. But not because I lost hope, because I remembered why I started. "These roses were 30 years old," I said, my voice barely controlled. "My grandparents planted them together. They've been here longer than half the houses in this neighborhood." She just shrugged, already filling out another violation notice. "Property violations don't have sentimental exceptions, honey. Rules are rules." Her assistant looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time since I'd met him. He kept glancing at the destroyed garden, then at her, then back at his clipboard like he was trying to disappear into the paperwork. When I asked him directly if he thought this was necessary, he mumbled something about following established procedures and refused to make eye contact. The man was a coward, but at least he knew what they were doing was wrong. "For landscaping violations, plus immediate removal of all non-compliant vegetation," she announced, handing me another yellow notice. "You have 72 hours to clear everything and reseed with approved ground cover. Failure to comply will result in additional fines and possible legal action." She surveyed the destruction with satisfaction, like an artist admiring her masterpiece. That afternoon, my neighbor came over with tears in her eyes. She'd watched the whole thing from her window and recorded it on her phone. "Honey, she's gone too far this time. That garden was registered with the Neighborhood Historical Society. Your grandmother gave tours to garden club visitors from 3 different counties. Everyone loved those roses." My neighbor showed me the video she'd taken. Clear footage of her deliberately destroying plants while claiming to measure property lines. I spent the evening in the ruins of my grandparents' garden, trying to salvage what I could. Some of the bulbs might survive if I replanted them quickly. A few rose bushes could potentially be saved if I cut them back severely and hoped for the best. But 30 years of careful cultivation, of shared memories, and quiet Sunday mornings spent weeding together was gone forever, because one woman couldn't tolerate anyone existing outside her control. The violation total had reached $2,300. She had given me one final ultimatum: pay in full within 7 days or face foreclosure proceedings. She'd done this dance before, knew exactly how to push people past their breaking point, how to make staying and fighting cost more than leaving quietly. But she had miscalculated badly this time. I called in sick to work and spent the next 3 days in my garage workshop designing something special. Not just a mailbox replacement, but a statement, a line in the sand, a trap disguised as surrender. I sketched designs, calculated load-bearing requirements, ordered materials from suppliers who specialized in Hollywood-grade construction. If she wanted to escalate this war, I was ready to give her a battle she'd never forget. The neighbors had started avoiding me completely now, too afraid of becoming her next target to show any sympathy or support. I couldn't blame them. They'd watched 3 families get destroyed by this woman's systematic harassment campaign. They knew exactly what happened to people who crossed her, and they had families to protect. But their silence was also complicity, and it made her power seem absolute. On Sunday evening, I stood in the wreckage of my grandparents' garden and made a promise to their memory. I thought about all the Sunday afternoons we'd spent here together. Grandma teaching me about different rose varieties while Grandpa explained how proper drainage prevented root rot. They'd built something beautiful that brought joy to an entire community, and she had destroyed it for no reason other than to demonstrate her power. My neighbor knocked on my door that night with a plate of homemade cookies and a folder full of documents. "I've been keeping records on her for 2 years," she said quietly. "Every violation notice, every family she's targeted, every abuse of power." She handed me the folder with shaking hands. "That garden meant everything to your grandparents. Don't let her win." Looking at those crushed roses in the moonlight, I made a promise to Grandpa's memory. She had bullied her last neighbor. Monday morning, Her little game ends with a bang she'll never forget. Sunday night became planning time. I spread blueprints across my workbench like a general preparing for battle, calculating stress loads and impact resistance while the rest of Juniper Lane slept peacefully. In Hollywood, we build two kinds of props: things designed to break spectacularly and things designed to survive explosions. I was about to construct the ultimate example of the second category. The foundation required serious engineering. 4 feet deep, steel-reinforced concrete designed to anchor something much heavier than a typical mailbox. I had to work in sections during her assistant's lunch breaks and her afternoon errands, disguising the construction as routine landscaping repairs. My neighbors probably thought I was finally complying with the violation notices, fixing the property line issues by installing new borders. The mailbox looked HOA approved in every way: height, color, placement. I even printed out the local ordinance and checked every measurement twice. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, it was an immovable object waiting for its force. From the outside, it looked exactly like every other mailbox on Juniper Lane. Standard aluminum construction, regulation height, approved suburban aesthetics. But inside that innocent exterior was a solid steel core anchored to that concrete foundation with enough strength to stop a small truck. The whole thing was designed to absorb massive impact without showing so much as a scratch. Her surveillance schedule made the work challenging, but not impossible. She drove by 6 times per day like clockwork, slowing down to photograph any changes to my property. I timed my construction around her pattern, working in my garage during her lunch hour and installing components after dark when she was safely inside watching her evening television programs. Her assistant made his daily violation deliveries at precisely 10 a.m., so I scheduled concrete pours for 10:30. The camera system required more subtlety: multiple angles, hidden mounting points, wireless transmission to backup storage locations. I wanted every second of the coming impact documented from different perspectives, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence that even her creative interpretation skills couldn't dispute. My neighbor offered to help by positioning additional recording devices from her window, creating a comprehensive surveillance network. By the middle of the week, her paranoia was reaching new heights. She'd started making extra drive-bys, sometimes parking across the street for 20 minutes at a time while she studied my house through binoculars. Her assistant mentioned during one of his violation deliveries that she was concerned about unauthorized construction activities, but my permits were all in order, and my work was technically just landscaping and mailbox maintenance. The psychological pressure was relentless. New violations appeared daily. Excessive tool usage during restricted hours, unauthorized material storage, construction debris creating visual pollution. Each notice came with escalating fines and shorter deadlines. She was accelerating her timeline, probably sensing that I was planning something and wanting to crush me before I could implement it. Thursday brought the ultimate insult: a violation for memorial display without proper permits. Apparently, the small stone marker I'd placed in memory of my grandparents, carefully set within the existing garden bed, was now a non-conforming memorial blight that disrupted the aesthetic neutrality of Juniper Lane. The fine was $1,000, and it came with a threat of immediate removal by a professional HOA contracted crew if I didn't comply within 24 hours. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was a desecration. The trap springs. The morning of the final confrontation dawned crisp and cold. My new mailbox stood gleaming in the early light, looking utterly innocuous. But beneath its suburban facade, it was a monolith of steel and concrete, waiting. I had a camera inside the mailbox itself, another hidden in a nearby bird feeder, and my neighbor had her phone pointed discreetly from her living room window. My old friend, Sheriff Thompson, was also in on it. He was a man of quiet integrity, tired of the frivolous complaints she flooded his office with. He was hidden in my garage, waiting for my signal. Precisely at 5:58 a.m., her black SUV rounded the corner. She slowed, aimed, and then accelerated. The impact was deafening, a sickening crunch of metal, a violent jolt that vibrated through my very bones. But instead of the familiar sound of a mailbox shattering, there was a different sound, a screech of tires, followed by the ominous crack of a rapidly deploying airbag. The SUV bounced back, listing heavily, its front end crumpled like tin foil. My mailbox stood unblemished, a silent monument to unexpected resilience. I saw her through the windshield, illuminated by the flashing airbag. Her face was a mask of pure shock, then agonizing pain. She wasn't just startled, she was hurt. Her airbag, designed to protect her from high-speed collisions, had deployed with full force, slamming into her. 30 minutes later, her second-in-command, looking even more terrified than usual, pulled up in his own car, followed by the news van I'd noticed earlier. The reporter, Bethany, was already setting up her camera, her eyes wide with anticipation. This time, I'd called a contact at the local news station myself, given them an anonymous tip about a major HOA scandal about to break. She emerged from her now destroyed SUV, a dazed look on her face, clutching a handkerchief to her nose, which was bleeding. Her hair was a wild mess, a stark contrast to her usual immaculate coif. Her pantsuit was disheveled. She marched towards my porch, still clutching her clipboard, clearly in pain but driven by sheer, unadulterated fury. "You property saboteur!" she shrieked, her voice thick with rage and something that sounded suspiciously like a nasal whine from a possibly broken nose. "What have you done to my vehicle? This is an act of premeditated automotive assault. You deliberately engineered this. You built an illegal structure. You will pay for this. Every penny." She then doubled over, clutching her stomach. "I built a mailbox as per regulations," I said calmly, stepping onto the porch, my cameras recording every agonizing second. "It seems your vehicle had an unfortunate accident with it. Perhaps you were driving recklessly again." "Recklessly?" she sputtered, regaining some of her theatricality despite the pain. "I was maintaining community standards, and now you owe me for my SUV. This is a criminal act of structural aggression, and while we're on the subject, you owe the HOA $5,000 in accumulated fines. For your rogue garden, your unauthorized sign, your excessive noise, and for traumatizing my emotional support squirrel with your loud tools." She pulled out the latest, most absurd fine notice yet, holding it up like a sacred scroll. "Pay up, Mr. Thorne, or face immediate legal action. I have the power to foreclose on your property. I will make you destitute. I will make you beg." $5,000, you say? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "For a garden? For a sign? For noise?" I nodded subtly towards the garage. The garage door slowly rumbled open, revealing Sheriff Thompson, his uniform perfectly pressed, his expression unwavering. He stepped out, his presence immediately commanding attention. Karen's eyes, already wide with pain and fury, widened further, then narrowed in disbelief. You domestic conspirator!" she shrieked, pointing at me, then at the sheriff. "This is a setup! This is harassment! He's using the police! He's bribed you!" "Karen DuBois," Sheriff Thompson said, his voice ringing with authority. "I'm afraid you're the one facing charges: extortion, fraud, harassment, and now reckless endangerment and property damage. We have security footage of you deliberately ramming this mailbox on multiple occasions. And that little performance about the $5,000 fine? We have that on record, too." He held up a small, discreet recording device. "Recordings? No! You can't!" she screamed, lunging at the sheriff, forgetting her pain in a fit of rage. "This is illegal surveillance! I will sue you! I will sue him! I will sue everyone! This is a tyrannical overreach of rural law enforcement." Just then, my grandniece, Lily, stepped onto the porch from inside the house, holding up a tablet. "And actually, Miss DuBois," she said, her voice clear and calm, "this isn't just on record, it's live. We're streaming this entire conversation, your car crash, your injuries, your accusations, and your attempted extortion, to the Juniper Lane Community Facebook group, to a local news channel, and it's already trending on a national HOA watchdog forum. Over 10,000 people are watching right now." Karen's face, already pale and contorted, turned an alarming shade of green. She looked at Lily, then at the news camera, then back at Sheriff Thompson, a desperate, frantic look in her eyes. "Live? No! You digital terrorist! This is an invasion of privacy. This is public humiliation via electronic subjugation." Then came the crescendo. From the gathered crowd of neighbors, emboldened by the live stream and the sheriff's presence, a cacophony of voices rose. "She fined me for my rose bushes being too fragrant. She tried to make me paint my mailbox pink. She forced me to remove my gnome collection, Sheriff, claiming they were eyesores, Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor, pushed through the crowd, a folder thick with her own fake violation notices. And she tried to fine me for my bird feeder, Sheriff. She said my bird bath was attracting undesirable avian elements and charged me a nuisance fee of $500. I have the receipt. The news reporter Bethany, sensing the story of a lifetime, thrust her microphone into the throng of angry residents. It seems we have multiple allegations of fraudulent fines and abuses of power against Miss Dubois. Live on air. Karen's eyes darted wildly, her composure completely shattered. These are all lies. Lies! He's manipulating them. He's a rural Svengali. He's hypnotized them with his prop magic. His gnomes are probably mind-controlling them. She then tried to lunge at Lily's tablet again, but Sheriff Thompson quickly intervened. And then came the biggest, most shocking twist. As Sheriff Thompson gently restrained Karen, her phone, which she'd dropped in her struggle, rang. It was on speaker. A gruff male voice boomed from the speaker, clear as a bell for everyone to hear, including the live news broadcast. Karen, did you get those old fools to sign the papers? We need Thorne's property cleared by next month. The developer's getting antsy. Tell him the gnome fines are just the tip of the iceberg if he doesn't sell. We need that land for the new luxury condo complex. Don't mess this up. Silence. A stunned, absolute silence fell over the crowd, the news crew, and even Sheriff Thompson. Karen's face went from green to stark white, then to a sickly shade of gray. Her enforcers looked like they wanted to disappear into the asphalt. Sheriff Thompson picked up the phone, his expression hardening like granite. This is Sheriff Thompson. Who is this? The voice on the other end immediately hung up. It wasn't just about gnomes, was it, Karen? Sheriff Thompson said, his voice low and dangerous, each word a hammer blow. You were trying to drive down property values, intimidate Elias and other neighbors, and force them to sell their land for a massive development project. These fines were just a way to bleed them dry or scare them off. This isn't just HOA violations anymore. This is criminal conspiracy, extortion, and fraud. Karen crumpled. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a pathetic whimper. No, you don't understand. It was for the community, for progress, she stammered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Progress at the expense of your neighbors' homes? Sheriff Thompson shook his head. That's not progress, Karen. That's a felony. The grand finale, an epic arrest. Suddenly the air filled with the distant wail of sirens. 2 more Sheriff's Department vehicles, lights flashing, screeched to a halt at the curb. Out of them poured uniformed deputies. The entire street was now a crime scene. As Sheriff Thompson placed the handcuffs on Karen, she let out one last, desperate shriek, echoing her absurd accusations. He's a rural rogue operative. He built a weaponized mailbox. He's in league with the gnomes. You're making a mistake, Sheriff. This is a constitutional crisis of suburban overreach. Her flailing arms, still handcuffed, somehow managed to knock her own badge off her blazer. It clattered to the ground, the cheap gold glinting mockingly in the sun. Then, a black unmarked sedan with tinted windows pulled up, a figure emerging from the back seat. It was the man from the phone call, slick-haired and sharp-suited, the eminent legal counsel, Mr. Sterling Smythe. He hadn't expected the live stream, or the sheriff, let alone a whole police presence. He froze mid-stride, his jaw dropping as he took in the scene. The crumpled SUV, the news cameras, Karen in cuffs, and the sheriff looking directly at him. "Percival!" Karen wailed, her voice cracking. "They know everything! The gnomes, the drone, the land deal! He recorded it all!" Sterling Smythe's shark-like smile vanished, replaced by a furious snarl. He lunged, not at the sheriff, but at the news camera, attempting to grab it. "You have no right to film this! This is highly confidential business!" he roared, completely ignoring the live broadcast. "Sir, that's private property destruction!" Bethany, the reporter, yelled as her cameraman deftly sidestepped Sterling Smythe's grab. "And you're on camera!" Sheriff Thompson, quick as a cat, moved to intercept Sterling Smythe. "And you, sir, are now interfering with an arrest," the sheriff stated, pulling out a second pair of cuffs. "You're under arrest for obstruction and conspiracy." Sterling Smythe, realizing his grave mistake, tried to pivot and make a run for it. But my old basset hound, Red, ever the loyal guardian and silent observer, had been waiting. With a surprising burst of speed for an old dog, Red darted out, got under Sterling Smythe's legs, and sent him sprawling onto my prize-winning petunias. The lawyer let out a high-pitched yelp as his expensive suit landed squarely in a bed of freshly fertilized soil. Red then sat triumphantly on his back, giving a satisfied woof just as a deputy slapped cuffs on the flailing lawyer. The news cameraman got it all. Karen, handcuffed and sobbing, accusing me of gnome-based telepathy. Sterling Smythe, face down in my petunias, struggling to get up while Red sat triumphantly on his back. The confused HOA enforcers trying to look inconspicuous, and the bewildered crowd of neighbors cheering and applauding. It was an absolute spectacle, a testament to the fact that truth, no matter how absurd, finds a way. The federal charges against her and her eminent legal counsel mounted rapidly. Fraud, extortion, harassment, conspiracy to commit land fraud, and even environmental violations were among the many counts. The news story went national, a cautionary tale of suburban tyranny and unexpected justice. The FBI even sent an agent to interview me, confirming my gnome cams and Lily's live stream footage were key evidence. The Juniper Lane HOA, utterly disgraced, was immediately dissolved. A new, sensible neighborhood association formed, led by my neighbor, who promptly declared my gnomes protected historical landmarks and my birdbath a community sanctuary. She even started a Gnome of the Month award for the most whimsical display